I'm delighted that you have a show because you're fresh, you're funny, you're great. And I want you to know something. From my heart, I never liked you.
He made all of Hollywood laugh out loud, while shifting uneasily in their seats. Don Rickles, the master of quick-fire verbal blows, a man whose razor-sharp humor drew roaring laughter but often left scars behind. He roasted everyone, from A-list stars to living legends, and not all of them forgave him. Behind the laughter, the standing ovations, and the bright stage lights, there were wounds that never healed. Some comedians laughed it off, some faked their smiles, and others carried grudges that never faded. So what really happened when the cameras stopped rolling? Who did Rickles salt the wound so deeply that they could never let it go? The list will definitely surprise you. Before answering that question, let's turn back the clock a little. To understand Don Rickles, we need to know where he came from. Don Rickles was born on May 8, 1926, in Queens, New York, into a Jewish family of European immigrants. His father, Max Rickles, worked as an insurance agent, while his mother, Etta, a strong-willed housewife, would later have a huge influence on his personality. The Rickles family was not wealthy, but they raised their son with a spirit of hard work and that distinct New York sense of humor. From an early age, Rickles was quick-witted, sharp-tongued, and unafraid to poke fun at others. Growing up in the crowded, ethnically diverse neighborhoods of Queens, humor became his shield, helping him avoid bullies and secure his place among friends. This environment honed his ability to observe, pick out someone's weakness, and flip it into a joke, a skill that would later define his stage persona. After graduating from high school, Rickles enlisted in the U.S. Navy during World War II, serving in the Philippines. The intense atmosphere of war only deepened his realization that laughter had the power to chase away fear. When the war ended, he returned to America with dreams of becoming a serious actor. Rickles enrolled at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts, chasing ambitions in Hollywood. He tried his hand at film, television, and theater, but big roles continually eluded him. Refusing to abandon show business, Rickles hustled his way through nightclubs in Miami and New York, earning a living as a stand-up comic. At first, he wrote scripts and told jokes like everyone else. But then, one night, while being heckled by the audience, Rickles shot back with a sharp remark on the spot, and the whole room burst into laughter. That was the defining moment. Rickles realized that his true strength didn't lie in pre-written material, but in his ability to strike directly at the audience, at his opponents, at anyone who dared to sit in front of him. From there, the King of Roast was born. He poked fun without restraint, race, religion, appearance, social status. No one was spared. The audience loved it, Hollywood stars laughed uncontrollably, and even politicians weren't safe. But, and here's the interesting part, not everyone could stomach Rickles biting jabs. Some laughed on stage but carried resentment behind the scenes. Others didn't even bother to hide their irritation. So which names ever clashed directly with Don Rickles? Who laughed to cover it up? Who held lasting grudges? And who dared to openly fire back at the King of Roast? Let's dive into each of those dramatic relationships. The first name, Johnny Carson, the friend, and perhaps the missed opportunity. If there was anyone calm enough to sit through Don Rickles' verbal jabs, it was Johnny Carson. On television, Carson often played the role of the composed man, smiling as he endured, letting Rickles unleash his biting mockery. That very contrast created a legendary rhythm of comedy. Rickles the madman, Carson the anchor that kept the studio from exploding. Yet behind the laughter lay another story. When Jack Paar stepped down from the powerful chair of The Tonight Show in the early 1960s, Rickles was rumored to be among the contenders. In the end, however, the opportunity went to Carson. Rickles never confirmed it, but for years, industry whispers suggested that the King of Roast carried at least some resentment. Then, in 1976, came an unforgettable moment. While Carson was absent, Rickles was invited to guest host and accidentally broke Carson's treasured cigarette box. When Carson returned, he didn't scold him backstage. Instead, he stormed right into the set of Rickles' sitcom, interrupted the taping, and confronted him on camera. The audience roared with laughter, and the clip later became a classic in American television history. Though there were rumors of jealousy and underlying tension, Rickles and Carson's friendship endured until Carson's retirement. Still, many observers believed that deep inside Rickles, there always lingered a question. What might have happened if the late-night throne had gone to him instead of Johnny Carson? Number 2. Jay Leno, the successor without the magic. When Johnny Carson stepped away from the legendary chair of The Tonight Show in 1992, all of America watched a successor, Jay Leno. And of course, Don Rickles continued to appear frequently on the show. Like a piece of shared heritage, the program couldn't do without. But this time, the atmosphere had changed. Carson had once let Rickles run wild, leaving space for his blunt verbal stabs to ignite into comedy gold. Leno was different. He kept the script tight, the structure neat, with fewer surprises. For Rickles, it was like stepping into the same old playground, but under a whole new set of rules. Rickles didn't hesitate to voice his frustration right on air. He mocked Leno's hair, ridiculed his hosting style, and even once quipped about being locked up in the green room like a prisoner while younger stars were given priority. The audience still laughed, and Leno still smiled it off, but anyone perceptive could see it. Beneath the humor, there was a touch of sharpness, a trace of tension that never quite disappeared. True to his nature as a by-the-book player, Leno never fired back publicly. He let Rickles jab as much as he pleased, then smoothly moved on to the next segment. But for Rickles, The Tonight Show under Leno was no longer the stage he had once ruled alongside Carson. No more freedom, no more sense of unleashing like before. And that very mismatch turned the Rickles-Leno dynamic into a fascinating picture, a legend unwilling to step back, facing a new generation, safer, more disciplined, yet missing the explosive fire that had once created the magic. Bob Hope, when the gentle father was put on the roast. In the public's eyes, Bob Hope was the symbol of a golden era. Carefully written monologues, USO tours dedicated to the troops, a brand of humor that was safe, accessible, and family-friendly. He was America's gentle father on stage, revered throughout Hollywood. Number 3. Bob Hope. By the time Rickles was climbing the comedy ladder, Hope was already an untouchable giant, an elder statesman of American entertainment, known for his scripted monologues and polished political jokes. Hope's humor was controlled, safe, and built for mass appeal. Rickles was the opposite, chaotic, confrontational, and dangerously unfiltered. That clash came into full view during the Dean Martin celebrity roasts. On stage, Rickles went straight for Hope's carefully constructed persona. He mocked his reliance on cue cards, his stale one-liners, and even his desperate need for approval. The jabs were brutal, but so perfectly timed that even Hope had to laugh, though everyone in the room knew what Rickles was really doing, tearing down an untouchable idol. It was more than just jokes. It was a generational collision, right there under the stage lights. Hope represented old-school comedy, safe, scripted, and predictable. Rickles represented the future, dangerous, raw, and impossible to contain. And Rickles made sure everyone saw the difference. Interestingly, he wasn't alone. Johnny Carson himself reportedly shared frustrations about Hope. Carson disliked how Hope would insist on scripting every appearance on The Tonight Show, even forcing Carson's own responses to be pre-written. That suffocated Carson's natural improvisation, the very thing Rickles thrived on. For both men, Hope's presence felt less like a guest and more like a relic. But Rickles didn't just take shots at old-school men. He saved plenty of fire for the sharpest women in comedy, too. And no one knew that better than Joan Rivers. Rickles and Rivers circled each other for decades. They had more in common than either would admit, both sharp-tongued, both fearless, both unafraid to tear into anyone. But when they shared a stage, the sparks flew. Their exchanges weren't just funny, they were battles. They were a dangerous pair on stage, two razor-sharp comics who never backed down. Don Rickles and Joan Rivers. Both quick-witted, both unfiltered, both impossible to ignore in a room full of stars. When they shared a talk show couch, politeness went out the window. Rickles would fire off shots at Rivers's appearance, her raspy voice, or her never-ending parade of plastic surgeries. Rivers, never one to take a hit quietly, snapped right back, mocking Rickles's age, his loud suits, and his hopelessly outdated haircut. What made their sparring electric was its authenticity. It didn't feel rehearsed or polished. It was fast, raw, and dangerously real, as if the audience was witnessing a live duel with words. And that was the beauty of it. Despite the stinging insults, there was no real feud behind the scenes. Rickles and Rivers understood each other. They respected each other's place in the comedy world and recognized the gold that came from having someone equally fearless on the other side of the table. For Rickles, who often targeted women in ways critics would later call mean-spirited, Rivers was a rare equal. She didn't just take the punishment, she fired it back with even more force. Their rivalry wasn't personal, it was performance art. Two legends putting on a show that blurred the line between admiration and aggression. Together, they embodied a golden age of comedy where nothing was sacred, and laughter was drawn from discomfort. But not everyone who crossed Rickles's path could keep up. Some comedians thrived on his fire, others got burned. And one, in particular, found the experience less like a playful roast and more like a collision of two worlds that never quite belonged together. Number 4. Red Skelton. If Rickles was the king of the quick sting, Skelton was his polar opposite. Skelton built his empire on warmth, sentiment, and gentle characters, clowns, hobos, and tender souls that resonated with American families across generations. He was beloved, wholesome, safe. Rickles was anything but. The two men couldn't have been further apart in tone. And while Rickles never openly attacked Skelton by name, his routines often mocked the kind of sentimental comedy Skelton embodied. The jokes dripped with disdain for what Rickles considered old-fashioned or out of touch. To Rickles, Skelton's soft edges represented the very mold he had spent his career breaking apart. There's no hard evidence of open hostility, but the contrast between them was glaring. And in Hollywood, those kinds of unspoken rivalries had a way of lingering in the shadows. Their paths nearly intersected on the set of the 1963 comedy epic It's a Mad, 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 Mad World. Skelton had been invited to join the star-studded cast but turned it down. Whether for scheduling or creative reasons, no one can say for sure. But the what-ifs remain. Two very different giants of comedy almost sharing the same stage. Almost. Don Rickles was left out of one of the biggest comedy spectacles of the 1960s. It's a mad, 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 mad world. The film featured a who's who of comedy royalty, from Milton Berle to Sid Caesar to Jonathan Winters. Practically everyone was there. Everyone, except Don Rickles. According to some accounts, Rickles wanted in and may have even lobbied for a spot. When the final cast was announced, he wasn't on it. Whether Red Skelton's own absence had anything to do with that lineup is unclear, but the overlap is intriguing. Two comedians who represented opposite ends of the comedy spectrum, both missing from the marquee moment that defined their era. Rickles's act, in many ways, was the antithesis of Skelton's. Skelton gave audiences whimsy and sentiment. Rickles gave them discomfort and confrontation. On stage and in interviews, Rickles often made digs about comics who were afraid to hurt feelings. He never said Skelton's name, but the implication was hard to miss. Rickles didn't believe in soft landings, he believed in shockwaves. Still, both men thrived. Skelton became a safe favorite for older generations and conservative households. Rickles appealed to audiences who wanted raw, unfiltered chaos. Two very different visions of what comedy could be, and Rickles never shied away from drawing the line in the sand. But if Skelton embodied the softer side of comedy, Rickles's next point of contrast was on the opposite extreme. Number 5. Lenny Bruce. Bruce was the firebrand of his time, a comedian who didn't just tell jokes but went to war with American taboos. Religion, race, obscenity laws, politics, nothing was off limits, and his honesty often landed him in handcuffs as much as on stage. Rickles, meanwhile, was no less unfiltered, but he had a completely different mission. Bruce dissected systems. Rickles attacked people. The two rarely overlapped in philosophy. Bruce spent entire sets unraveling hypocrisy, sometimes without a single laugh line. Rickles demanded a laugh every 10 seconds. Bruce wanted you to think. Rickles wanted you to surrender. If Bruce was the professor, Rickles was the heckler in the back row, shouting down the lecture and getting the class to laugh with him. Rickles respected Bruce's trailblazing role. He understood that Bruce had kicked open the door for comics to say the unsayable. But Rickles never followed him through it. He wasn't interested in being a cultural critic. He wasn't interested in courtroom battles. He wanted the casino crowds, the late-night chaos, the sharp insult that landed with a sting and a laugh. Bruce pushed what could be said. Rickles pushed how it could be said. And by the time the 1990s rolled around, Rickles had become an institution. But not everyone saw him as untouchable. Number 6. Howard Stern. The shock jock who made his career by mocking everyone and everything, including the comedy legends who came before him. Stern didn't just question Rickles' style. He openly challenged whether it still had a place in a world that was getting bolder, brasher, and even less forgiving. Howard Stern didn't hold back when it came to Don Rickles. On multiple occasions, Stern took aim at him live on air, dismissing his style as outdated, irrelevant, and, perhaps the harshest cut of all, not funny. Coming from Stern, the king of shock radio who built his empire on brutal honesty, the blows landed with extra force. To Stern, Rickles wasn't an icon. He was a relic. Rickles, true to form, never fired back. He wasn't interested in public feuds. But behind the scenes, fans and insiders whispered that Stern's comments stung. Because for all his brashness on stage, Rickles was still a man who valued tradition. He believed in the old-school architecture of show business, roasts, variety shows, Vegas residencies. That was his world. Stern's world couldn't have been more different, explicit, chaotic, built on shock value and an utter disregard for Hollywood decorum. It wasn't just two personalities colliding, it was two eras. Rickles came from a time when comedy was polished, rehearsed, and built for the spotlight. Stern thrived in the raw, unscripted mess of live radio. For Rickles, the stage was sacred. For Stern, nothing was sacred, not even the legends. And yet, in 2017, when Don Rickles passed away, something surprising happened. Stern's tone shifted. The radio provocateur who once mocked him turned reverent. Stern delivered a heartfelt tribute, calling Rickles one of the greats and crediting him with shaping the comedy landscape. For a man who rarely softened his words, the tribute raised eyebrows. Was it genuine admiration? Or just respect for a fallen icon? Whatever the case, it spoke volumes. Even Rickles' harshest critics knew when they were standing in the shadow of a giant. Rickles didn't need to respond to every insult. His silence was its own statement. And in the end, the legacy spoke for itself. So, what about you? Were you a fan of Don Rickles' unapologetic style of comedy? Let us know in the comments below. And if you want more untold stories from the world of comedy, don't miss the next video on your screen.